Does he want twins now?
I wanted a nice little two-parent family.
Okay, I'd like to call our meeting to order, please. Welcome, everybody, to our first budget overview of the 2018. This is a special meeting of council to review the 2018 to 2022 five-year financial plan. Council, we have the agenda in front of us. I'd like to call the meeting to order and recognize that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Hupetchisitt and Sishot First Nation. I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda as distributed. Council, please.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
City Clerk?
One late item, it will be under 2.1 is the late item request from the McLean Mills Society for consideration under the project's options list.
Okay, 2.1. Okay, Council, with that one addition, we still have a motion to adopt the agenda with the addition, and seconded, I believe. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. So, Council, this brings us to the point where we have the overview of the five-year financial plan. So, what we're doing is the CAO is going to give us the overview, which reflects our pre-approved council direction and what we need for operational safety and longevity, which of course is the majority of our budget. And then we will look at our project options list. Tonight, we can, but we don't need to make any decisions. What I'd suggest is we really seriously look and question and make sure we completely understand what it involves. Again, stress if council wishes to make a motion, we're fully able to do that. But primarily, we need to make sure we understand what it is that we're looking at and what our options are. And then we'll have an opportunity for input and questions from public. And then a council review in case there are any additional items that we want to put forth for consideration. And as well, I'm sorry I've neglected, but Councillor Paulson is not able to be with us this evening. He has an appointment out of town. So, CAO, I'll turn it over to you. You're going to control the clicker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try.
Okay.
Better men have failed. So, Mr. Mayor, Council, tonight is our first presentation, first discussion of the draft financial plan. Davina's got a schedule up on the screen for you to see. And it shows that tonight, January 15th, we're going to take a high-level look at the draft financial plan. We'll touch on how that draft budget or plan addresses your direction to council, or to staff, sorry, given in August of last year. We'll point out to you any service impacts that we're aware of that result from this budget. And I'm not planning to put the capital plan up on the screen because you've got that in your agenda packages, and as you're familiar with, it's extensive. But we can talk about anything in there that you want to talk about. I would like tonight to go over the project's option list, and I can walk you through some of those projects, and we have other staff here who have a better knowledge than I to walk you through those other ones. And what I think is important today is that you understand as a council what this draft financial plan looks like, how we got here, and especially what the projects are on the options list, and so that you can go forward from here. I would hope that at the end of tonight that we would like council to have finalized the project's options list, meaning that you've populated it with the options that you want to consider. You don't have to make decisions tonight if you don't want to. But after we leave tonight, it would be nice at subsequent meetings if you didn't have to consider new projects for the list, if you just consider the ones that are on there. So if you have things you want to see on there, tonight is the time to tell us that. And you can see by the schedule, we meet again January 29th. For what we call an e-town hall. That will be a round table format like we've used in last year, and we'll be able to receive questions for the public via social media and texting, email, that kind of thing. we did one last year, it went very well, and we're looking forward to this year's. And following that, February 19th, we're scheduled for another roundtable without the e-town hall format, where council can ask further questions of managers. And you can see a number of to-be-determined dates on that table. That basically indicates that we can meet as often as council needs to, as many times as council needs to. And if you go further down the page, by March 26th, council needs to give 3 readings to a financial plan bylaw so that we can go that's kind of our drop dead date for getting into the cycle to submit our budget and our tax bylaw to the province by the required date. So that is the working schedule, Mr. Mayor. Davina, if you can show us a PowerPoint, please. So council, in front of you, you've got a hard copy of this PowerPoint presentation with some speaking notes. And I won't be projecting the notes, but you've got the notes in front of you. And the package with the notes in it will be posted to the city's website. Look at that. Yeah, winner. So our vision, a vibrant waterfront community. I'll try not to read all the bullets and all the slides. This is the mandate that you have given yourselves, and this budget should be addressing this as much as possible. And if it's not, then we've missed the mark. Some of the slides you'll recognize from previous years, from last year. There were 3 critical issues that council focused on last year, and that was a tax base and a population that, while stable, has not grown. Also, that we've recognized that our funding for infrastructure renewal is not adequate is not sustainable, and that as a community we have a reliance on industrial tax base that we'd prefer not to be so heavily dependent upon. So with those 3 issues in mind, council gave us direction in 2016 for the 2017 to 2021 5-year financial plan to set a course that would effectively transfer our dependency on industrial taxes from our day-to-day operations to making that money available for infrastructure renewal. And the course that we said that if we stayed that course for 12 years, we would achieve that all industrial tax dollars would be available for infrastructure renewal. So we started the course in 2017 where we, as much as possible, kept operating costs increases to a 1% per year or 5% over 5 years. And we committed to taxing at 3% with the intention that 2% differential would over time grow and be funds that would be available for infrastructure renewal. And I know you remember that, but I'm probably speaking to other people, not you, for their benefit. Excuse me. So in August of this year, or last year, council gave direction that primarily said stay the course. And you wanted to have the same budget direction, and you wanted a similar process. You didn't want department by department presentations. You wanted to determine the information that you needed by asking questions. So I'll say to you, it's imperative that you do ask questions. If you have any doubt at all, you need to ask us, because we're not doing department by department presentations. None of our departments get to tell you what their needs are or what their critical needs are. So it's important that you ask them if you have a project that you see or an ask that is on the projects list, let's say, it's important that you ask them questions and give them an opportunity to speak to that. You wanted to use, again, collaborative roundtable sessions with council and senior staff, and you wanted to try to use the e-town hall meeting format again. So some of this we touched on. Last year we brought to you a draft budget that showed 1% or 5% increases, no more than 5, over a 5-year period in every department, except for one, except for policing. We just couldn't get there on policing. So while we made some reductions in policing, we didn't get down to 5%. But in all others, we showed you a 5% over 5 years. And in 2 of those departments, fire and economic development, council, after considerable deliberation, put money back into those departments. So we found ourselves with all departments except 3 achieving the 5% over 5 years, but police, fire, and economic development had higher increases over the 5-year period. And so what we've done this year is every department that, except those 3, every department had to commit to the numbers, the bottom line numbers that they showed for years 2018 through 2021 in the previous budget. And in the 5th year, most of the departments had to not exceed 1% increase. And those 3 departments, police, fire, and economic development, had to bring forward a status quo budget. So what would it take for them to maintain the same level of service in the 5th year? If we stay this course, we'll increase our funds from taxation available for infrastructure renewal by over 300% over 5 years. So we'll have close to $3 million in the 5th year for infrastructure if we were to stay that course. So by the numbers, we thought it was important to show you 2016 and 17 as well, because you started this course in 2017, it's important to see where we came from. In 2017, last year, we showed you that we were projected to spend $930, I believe, $1,000 on infrastructure, and in the end, we only spent $708 because we put money that was on the options list back into operations, some of it. So we actually declined last year the money that goes to infrastructure renewal from the previous year, which is obviously the direction we did not want to go in. Going forward, if we can commit to this course and stay the course, then you can see how those numbers will increase over time. If every year we have operational needs for which we put money back in, then we're going to stand still like we did last year, or not move at the pace that we'd like to. So you've seen this slide before in the next two. This shows the expenditures from property taxes for capital projects or infrastructure renewal. And 17, as I said, was slated to go up last year, and it didn't. It went down from the previous year. If we were to adopt the budget the draft budget as it stands now, and if every dollar on the options list went to capital, then you would see a graph like this for 2018. And if we continued that course over 5 years, this is what our expenditures from taxation would look like for capital or infrastructure renewal. So there's lots of opportunity within this 5 years of this plan to really turn in the right direction in terms of our infrastructure renewal. And if we stayed that course for 12 years, that's a really attractive graph, right? And that assumes a lot of things. It assumes that our tax base stays where it is, that industry continues to pay taxes, especially that. Mr. Mayor, if there's any questions from council, please jump right in. Don't wait till the end. So now we want to look at department by department, and just we'll start off. We put them in sequence for the lowest dollar amount toward the highest dollar amount, and so the first one being animal control and protection. So if you just want to take a minute and look at that graph and see the kind of information that's on there, it's a standard format we're going to see for each department tonight. So it shows the 2018 to 2022 5-year financial plan. It also shows 2017 because, as I said, it's important to know where we came from. It shows the differential in dollars from the previous year, and it shows the differential in percentage as well. And on the bottom, it shows the 5-year net increase or decrease. So for animal control and protection, which is our SPCA contract, it increases by $45 over 5 years, or 0%. Question, Councillor?
Yeah, like every year, the SPCA and others, they come with a wish list that because they need more money, costs have gone up. Have we factored into this from what we did in 2017, or are we going to get reduced service on that?
Factored in, I'm sorry, what we did in 2017?
It's just inflation. I mean, their wages are going to go up, and probably at some point, and other costs, and maybe that's already taken care of for the 5-year contract. I'm not sure.
So in this case, it will be a contract price, and I don't have the information on the contract if it has inflation built in or if it's fixed, but I can bring that information at a future meeting. So as we go through the other departments, I'll tell you on the animal control, so it's a contract service. We also have contract services for library services. It's not contract per se, but it's a arm's length, and transit, and we're not showing those two tonight. I haven't got figures for those tonight. If you want to see those, we can bring those, but they are largely beyond our control, those costs. So the planning department, planning bylaw building, now this is development services, and development services actually includes engineering as well. But for budget purposes, we've kept engineering out. And you'll see that the net cost of that department is, in 2018, $266,000. So the net cost is very little. That department generates significant revenues. On this one, I want to call your attention to a significant reduction in 2017. When we did a 5-year plan last year, that department met the 5% over 5-year criteria, and they did it largely by a significant reduction in the first year. Now that that year, 2017, has dropped off the 5-year plan, you'll see the net is 15.9% over 5 years, which is not actually fair because they made their reduction in 2017, which is outside of this 5 years. So we wanted to show you 2017 because what happened last year is relevant to what we're doing this year. Economic development. So economic development is one of those departments that council did not want to hold to 5% over 5 years. And you'll see that in 2017, we made a significant increase in that budget of $47,000. And after that year, it's for the most part status quo. And in year 5, 2022, where the direction was to show a budget figure for status quo, a status quo in 2022 is going to be a 1.5% increase, which is fairly modest given that we're likely to see wage increases higher than that. And so the 5-year net for economic development, 2018 to 2022, is just under $20,000, or 4.4%. I'll point out that we made some reductions in that department. We made an 11% reduction of the value of $2,500 in consulting services in 2022. So engineering and administration. So this is the engineering portion of the development services. So they're opposite to planning. When we did a 5-year budget last year, the first year of that 5-year budget, 2017, actually saw a 6% increase and then decreases in every year, the next 3 years after that. And that was how they achieved their 5% over 5 years. So now that that increase year is gone, this budget looks pretty good, right? 2018 to 2022, showing a negative 4.6 figure, or a reduction in $24,000 in year 5 over 2017. And we've done that largely in engineering by transitioning over the next 3 years so that by the end of 2020, we'll have 70% of our 2 engineering technologists. The cost for those 2 technologists will be coming from capital, not from operating. So we're anticipating that as we do more and more capital, the salaries for those employees will be coming from those capital projects. So that's allowed us not necessarily to reduce the actual dollars, but to reflect where they actually come from, right, or where they'll actually be spent.
CAO, does this in any way include the consulting fees that would be associated with engineering?
Yes, it does, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for pointing that out. So what we've also done there is over the 5-year period, 2018 to 2022, we've reduced the consulting services line by 50%. So from $40,000 to $20,000. It was $40,000 in 2017. It'll be $20,000 in 2022. So a significant reduction there.
Oh, okay. Councillor Minions.
Thank you. What does that $20,000 actually represent, though? I think, you know, it looks great on paper now today to say we're going to reduce that, cut that budget in half, but what's not going to get done because we're cutting that budget in half so that we can fit it into an arbitrary number we've chosen?
That's a really good question. So what that does is it takes away our flexibility. So in previous years when we've had $40,000 of flexibility, if council wants to undertake a heavy truck traffic count or some project like that, that's where that money comes from. So if we're going to reduce our flexibility, this is flexible consulting money, if we're going to reduce that, it reduces council's and staff's ability to make decisions mid-year. So if we want to make decisions like that, to do a study or a review of traffic or anything engineering, we'll either have to wait till the next year to put it in the budget, or we'll have to have an approved capital project. So it means the engineering consulting will happen in some capital projects. There'll be less flexibility. So council might want to consider that. So moving along, heritage and culture. Now, heritage and culture lives within Parks and Recreation and Heritage. But as in last year, we wanted to break this out so that you could look at heritage separately. So you'll see that 2017 had a significant increase, largely in 2017 because we approved some funding off the options list for McLean Mill, which drove up the heritage cost. And you'll see in 2018 a significant reduction, 13%. I'll remind you that on the options list, which we're going to look at soon, there's $131,000 for McLean Mill options. So if council chooses to adopt those or fund those those lines, it'll be on top of this. So going forward, if we're going to continue to fund some McLean Mill projects, rail for the most part, outside of the budget, we should probably put that in the budget so it actually reflects better, because you can see there that 2017 didn't look like that when I showed it to you last year. It looked like that after you made your options decisions.
Councillor Sobey.
Thank you. Isn't it the rail maintenance already part of the budget for McLeansville?
Good question. Rail maintenance is part of the budget, but not to the magnitude of which we spent certainly in 2017. So it costs more to maintain the rail than is in the operating budget or the capital budget. That's why there's a supplemental project on the projects list. It's very similar to last year.
Aren't they going after grants and that sort of thing in order to fund the cost of some of their significant repairs that they're anticipating?
Yeah, I'm aware they're looking at options. Grants are one of them for the trestles, but the ongoing maintenance, we talked about changing. We have a 10-year maintenance plan, which includes 400 ties a year, vegetation control, a number of other things. That costs some serious money, over and above the bridges, right? And McLean Mill will be here, McLean Mill Society will be here at future meetings to answer those questions.
Okay, thank you.
You will notice that there's a significant overall reduction, $167,000 over 5 years. That's a little inflated because 17 was so high, 2017. But it does reflect that McLean Mill Society has committed to a 50% reduction in their operating grant from 2017 to 2022, to 2021 actually.
Oh, Councillor Alberni.
That was kind of the question that I was going to have. Is that a, for lack of a better word, a speculative thing? So are we hoping that McLean Mill will bring that reduction forward, or is that something that's more concrete?
I think they can achieve it. I think they've showed this year the way they manage. If they continue on that path, I think it's achievable. And could they spend more money? Absolutely. We all could, right? But they've made a hard commitment, and I think they will achieve it.
This number here doesn't reflect the direction that we're ultimately hoping to go or wanting to go as council. I shouldn't say hoping, well, we intend to go as council in terms of arts, culture, and heritage. So is staff indicating at this point, until we know what that looks like, we can't give those numbers? Is that?
Well, regardless of who owns the museum or who has a decision-making into how the museum operates, these are the costs. These are the costs that are driven by the current level of operation. So right now, the city bears the bulk of the cost. If we get other partners who might share those costs, this is still what it costs to run a museum and an industrial heritage site and industrial heritage cluster that we have.
But it'll be shared. Therefore, the cost to city and city taxpayers will change, right?
If we're successful in sharing the cost, then yeah, our share would go down. Hopefully, unless the museum improved, right? Or unless there was a greater commitment to heritage, and that would be a decision of council and whatever partners we had.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I should point out that we made a couple of commitments in our budget last year to get to the 5% over 5 years. One of which is that we're going to increase revenues beginning in 2019, and that'll be our work this year to work on that project and make sure that we meet that commitment. There's also an anticipated reduction in the plan for utility payments at some of our industrial buildings, and we're achieving those as we go forward. On the Industrial Heritage Center, there's a really good chance that we're going to have to offset that savings with some kind of fee for service to Industrial Heritage Society for maintaining our industrial fleet. So we're still in the process, early part of the process of talking with them about what does that look like. So there's still some challenges to overcome on heritage. General administration. This is, some might say bureaucracy here. This is City Hall. This is what it costs to operate local government at the administrative end. So there's, the Director of Finance says that she refers to the widows and the orphans, a number of budget lines that don't really belong anywhere else get collectively pulled into general administration. And you'll see that the bottom line is really attractive, a 3.5% reduction over 5 years. And that looks really good. That is largely, that net loss is largely on the revenue side. And we've got some revenue increases over the 5-year period that make that look pretty attractive. But this, the same principles that apply to other departments have been applied to this department as well. And as council's aware, we made some changes in our last year's budget, including reorganize the clerk's department to enhance the communications capacity with no increase in cost. We reduced a half-time employee by attrition in HR and absorbed that workload. We do have a cost increase in 2018 that is inside that budget of just under $53,000 due to the election. And that cost comes back to us again in 2022. So it's a every 4-year recurring cost. And I do need to point out that in order to meet the budget direction in our IT department, we had to make a hard decision to discontinue contributing to the Equipment Replacement Reserve Fund for the replacement of our servers. So currently we store our data on our own servers, and we just replaced those last year. And I'm told they're good for an estimated 5 years. And what we've done in the past is we've contributed to our own savings account so that every 5 years we have enough money to replace those. So in order to get to the budget direction, we had to discontinue putting money away for those servers. And we'll have to make a decision in 2022 if we start to store our data on a cloud service, or if we want to stay with our own servers. At that time, we're going to have to have an expenditure in that budget, and there won't be money in the Equipment Replacement Reserve Fund. So if that's a question you might want to ask IT in subsequent meetings.
Councillor Muniz?
Okay, I was just going to, you said in subsequent meetings, I was just going to say you talk about making that decision in 2022, but it feels like we definitely should be making that decision now if we want to be contributing to that or not, because it defeats the purpose of not budgeting for it just to, get the number we want to be at now if we're going to spend it in 2022. So I think we should make sure we have a good discussion about that now and make sure, not at this meeting, but with IT before, and make that decision this year to if we're going to transition to that or not.
And the budget meetings would be a great place to ask those questions. Some organizations already use cloud services, and so we wouldn't be necessarily be out in left field making that decision. And there would be an operating cost to using those services as well. So the question is, do we continue on this course, or do we change courses now? If we're going to continue on this budget course like this, we're going to have to make decisions about which services we change the way we deliver, and which ones we stop delivering, and which ones we accept a lower level of service. So can't just cut numbers, as you say. We need to think about how we do things differently.
I also worry about what our obligations are as a city to store our data. Does it have to be stored in Canada? Does it have to be stored in British Columbia? Or, how robust does the storage have to be? And are there requirements for municipalities that are different than the requirements for other levels of government? I don't know enough about that, but I'm sure our IT would know. Or
those are all good questions for IT, and maybe that, I'm thinking maybe a report to council on that whole topic.
Well, it'd be important for us in terms of making that decision.
That's correct.
Okay.
So next, Parks and Recreation. So Parks and Recreation and Heritage, of course, is a fairly significantly sized department. You can see the budget figures are getting larger. That's a net figure. Parks and Rec brings in, I believe, in the neighborhood of $1.6 million in revenue. And so the net expenditure is 2.6 in 2018. And you can see that there's a 4.7% increase projected over the 5-year plan. We made a couple changes last year that to help us get to that budget direction. And at this point, you know, the big news in Parks and Recreation is our approach with our efforts to work with ACRD to have regional district lead on aquatic services. And that's a project that will continue. So the next department, fire. So fire is the second of those 3 departments that council did not want to hold to 5% over 5 years. You can see that there's a 3.3% increase in 2022, which reflects a status quo in terms of service delivery in 2022 for a cumulative 13.7 over 5 years. We are,
Sorry, Councillor
Sorry.
McClement?
Yeah, do we know what the fire costs are gonna be? Do we know what the contract is, and when is the existing contract, I guess is my question, when is it up?
I think it's 2019, Chief, is it? 2019, the collective agreement is up. Until then, there's 2.5% increases on salary. But there'll be, we projected 2.5s, I believe, all the way out.
Okay, thank you.
So we are exposed in fire to increased costs in equipment replacement reserve fund contributions. They're going up 32% over the 5-year period, or $45,000 higher in 2022 than in 2017. And at Public Works, you'll see that there's a net of 0.8% over 5 years. Only an increase of 29,000 over those 5 years, which is significant. But again, we've budgeted out significantly. We've budgeted out our flexibility. So we've taken flexibility out of a number of budget lines in terms of supplies and materials, for example. Budgeting, sailing closer to the wind in terms of budgeting.
Can we just, sorry,
Yep.
skipped over, back to fire
Yep.
bit. The $182,000 in revenue anticipated for 2018, what's the source of that revenue?
Largely that'll be, well, most of our revenue comes from contract services for fire protection. So we have several clients to whom we provide fire protection services. So that would be
Industrial clients, is that what we're talking?
yeah, the Sands Mill we provide service to, Sishot First Nation, Hupetchesset First Nation.
Okay, thank you.
In Public Works, we've made a reduction in 2018 of $50,000 on road surface maintenance contract services. That's a 16% reduction. That's a question you might ask of the manager of operations when he's here at a subsequent meeting.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, sorry, Councillor Alberni?
Does that include any contingency for compost service if we're, no? Okay.
No, the garbage service is a fee for service. So we would likely, if there was a cost for composting, we would likely add that to the garbage. That's a decision of council.
You don't anticipate any operational impact from adding composting? We would just shift that all onto the utility bill? It's likely there'll be operational costs when we get to diverting organics, but we just don't know what those are yet. So when they come, we'll identify what those are, and we'll come back to council and say, do you want to do this on taxes or do you want to do it on garbage fees?
There's a cost for providing the actual containers that the
That's correct.
compost goes into, right?
That's correct.
And so do we have money set aside for that, or is that a decision that hasn't been made yet?
We haven't got money specifically, we haven't identified money to set aside, but we have reserves for in the garbage fund. We have reserved to replace our existing cans, and they've lasted longer than we thought they would. So we'll have some choices to make. We can divert some or all of that money to the new organic bins and and extend the lives of the current cans longer, but we'll have to make a decision when that time comes to see what is the condition of our current cans. Can we use that money now safely, or do we have to tax for more?
Be interesting to see what percentage of our households actually take advantage of that or want that, because I'm sure people will have the option of, yes, we want it, no, we don't, because, I mean, some people, myself included, don't want to share my organics because we use them for our own gardens. So that might be a savings for us, is what I'm saying.
Discussions to come.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the last department is policing.
Why did you save that to last?
Save the best for last.
Okay.
So, as you know, we provide policing services under a contract. The RCMP provides it to the city under contract. And you'll see that, you'll see the numbers, 8.5% over 5 years increase. And I need to point out to you some of the things we talked about last year, that starting last year, we began to underfund the police, the RCMP, by 2 members, the cost equivalent to 2 members. And previous to that, we've been underfunding them by 1 and relying on under expenditures every year to cover that difference. And starting last year, we started to underfund by 2 members, and that's currently about a $340,000 under expenditure. We can do that safely because we have about $1 million in a reserve fund, so that if we, for some reason, don't see that under expenditure in 1 year, we can tap into that reserve fund to cover that shortfall. So that was one way that we were trying to reduce the overall cost to taxpayers for policing services. As you know, the calls for service in Port Alberni are among the highest in the province, and the costs of policing per capita is among the highest in the province. This is it's not new news for council. In 2017, we hired 1 new city employed manager, and that was a new position to us. And we budgeted $100,000 for that. And we told council that we envisioned with that position in place, we would anticipated saving or reducing costs in our support staff by $80,000 in 2018. And I'm told that we are on track to achieving that. So that manager position of the RCMP is paying dividends. Our employees are reported to be happier, and we're already making improvements in that area. So I'm very pleased with that. In 2019, as council knows, this budget includes a reduction of 1 RCMP member position, the equivalent cost of about $173,000 in 2019. And that's included in that budget.
Councillor Sylvain?
Just a question about 2019 reduction of 1 RCMP member position. What was the reasoning behind that? Because I know we underfunded with 2 positions because we always had a surplus and all that. But the fact that we did that, I understand, but why are we going to reduction of 1 member position in 2019?
The previous 5-year financial plan, 2017 to 2021, included 1 member reduction in 2019. That was discussed and approved by council last year. And that was purely, my recollection, about dollars, about managing costs.
Councillor McClellan?
Yeah, is that a 3rd member reduction, or is that the 2nd one we talked about last year?
So I think we're confusing 2 things. On the under budgeting, we under budget by 2 members. So we have 34 civilian municipal members, and we only budget enough for 32 of them. So we anticipate that we're not going to spend that full amount. And past history has told us that we often have almost always have an under expenditure in the RCMP in policing, because they have trouble keeping, as people transition in and out, there's vacancies and the savings pile up. So in effect, we've been overtaxing for policing for a number of years. And so a number of years ago, we started to put some of that surplus, we called it, into a reserve fund up to a maximum of $1 million, and it maxed out. And then we had a couple of years where we reallocated that extra money somewhere else. So we were taxing and budgeting higher for policing than we actually had to, and multiple years showed us that. So we tried under budgeting 1 member for a little while, and that worked. And last year we started under budgeting for 2 members, And my understanding is we're on track to meet that this year. So it was purely about trying to keep a cap on the cost of policing. Now, the reduction in members is that in 2019, we will go down from 34 members funded by the city to 33 members funded by the city. So
Okay,
two different issues.
Councillor Minions?
So just to clarify on the number of police members, we are currently budgeting for 32, but we are still trying to have 34. Inspector Hunter is trying to have 34 here at all times.
That's correct. He tries to keep 34 slots filled.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So effectively, you know, when we look at what happens with the monthly budget reports, we have done all of this and we got to the end of the year, we have approaching $500,000 overtaxed. So what you're talking about isn't actually going to decrease our current policing service. It just sort of reallocates a little bit more honest in terms of what we do with the money, or a little bit clearer in terms of what we do with the money.
For me, that under budgeting on the 2-member side, it doesn't decrease policing at all. It doesn't diminish policing at all. It diminishes the amount of tax dollars we collect every year for policing and then reallocate to something else because it's a surplus, we've been calling it. So we've been creating inadvertently flexibility in expenditures and then reallocating that money somewhere else at the end of the year. So I'm comfortable that the costs that we're budgeting now better reflect our past practice or our track record in what it actually costs to police at 34 members. And that's a completely different issue than a reduction of a member in 2019.
So would it be akin to people who pay more money into their income tax than they actually have to? Because when you get your tax return, there's always some money back. Would it be akin to that?
One might say.
All right. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor McClellan.
Yeah, so if we're losing one officer on the roster or whatever, then that's different than this over budgeting. And I understand what happened with the money and why we budgeted for less because of we always got to check back and said, hey, you because the federal government took over if people were off sick or didn't get transferred in here in time and things like that. But when we set up that fund, it wasn't initially to have the $1 million cap. I don't think we kind of put that on it. Is that enough? And I'd like to have an answer. You know, I'm not asking you to answer it now, but at the next meeting possibly, because if we have some major operation here that we are paying for from the municipality, and that's our duty. Do we have enough in there to cover it? Because you know, I'd like to know that.
Okay, that's a good question for the inspector, and we'll bring that at a subsequent meeting. One last slide. We are creating a vibrant waterfront community, and here's how we're going to do it. So, Mr. Mayor, rather than walk through the capital budget, which is long and has a number of projects for which the public will not be overly interested, putting some pipes in the ground and that sort of thing, things that we won't see again. They'll be interested in the projects, not in watching us scroll through spreadsheets. I would suggest that we go to the projects list now and walk through those line by line.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Unless there is somebody on council that would really like to dig into the capital projects other than the options list. Councillor Minions.
Are we going to review the capital projects in a public meeting, or is it just in the package for us to review?
We're not planning to go over the whole document. We did that last year, and it was tedious. And so we took it out this year. If we can do it right now, if you want, we can bring it up and scroll through. That's not a threat. We can do it. We have time. Yeah.
Did you want to be here for your 30th birthday or not?
Apparently, I'm going to anyways.
Did you want to go through that's an option. If council would like to do that, it's an option to do it.
I'm fine with not doing it tonight. I'm just, I feel like we maybe should at least review the projects that are being done for the current year at some point, but maybe another budget meeting is fine.
It may be worth it to go through the projects to explain what they are, but not necessarily debate their relative merit, but just to explain,
Let's do that.
get a bigger sense of what those things are. And it may be that you don't personally want to do it, you want to wait until Wilf is available to go through that. I'm not sure.
I'd be happy if Wilf was here to do that, and that could be at a subsequent meeting. Okay, let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll go with this.
I think Councillor Minions is right, that it's worth it to just to review them so we have an idea of the big picture and not just,
Okay.
the
So at the
options.
next meeting, we can start off with an overview of the capital for 2018. And Wilf and a couple other managers will speak to those. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to go over the project
Sure.
options list.
And as I said earlier in the evening, this is about you directing the information you need. So that's how that looks. So thank you for doing that. Wilf Takema, our manager of operations, is not available tonight. So I'm going to speak very briefly to some of the capital projects, and then I'm going to pass it off to other staff to speak to the other projects. So under the heading of paving, well, let's just talk about the format first of all. So we've got, like last year, we have on the ones column a list of projects, and then the budgeted cost is the overall cost for that project. And then funds for general means how much of the funding for that project is coming from general revenue, which is primarily property taxes. And there's another column with other funding sources, because there's a couple projects for which we have some other funding sources. There's about $1.6 million worth of projects costs on this list, and there's in the neighborhood of $800,000 available for council to allocate to those projects. So you haven't got enough to do all of them, but there's some significant money available. Councillor?
Councillor Minions.
Can I just clarify, so if, are there operating projects on here as well, or are these all capital projects?
Good question. And we probably should come back at a future meeting and show you which ones are operational costs and which ones are which we would call capital or infrastructure. Some of them are operational costs.
Because I think looking at this slide from last year, that we ended up putting $708,000 into infrastructure spending, which was actually less than the year before, which is certainly not what we set out to do. I think the project list is where we got lost. Not lost, I mean, we knew the decisions we were making, but I think our intent was to fund infrastructure better, and we didn't end up doing that. So if we want to get to this $1.2 million in 2018, should I assume that every project we choose from that $800,000 we have to spend needs to be on capital?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, and just before you start, there is one question I forgot to ask, and that is, so if we were expecting to spend more than 708,000, but we only spent 708,000.
Yeah.
What happened to that other money? Because you said because the money in the options went into operations. So what didn't get done?
What didn't get done?
Yeah.
Millions of dollars of projects. We have no shortage of so it's not like we said no to some projects. There were some things perhaps on the projects list that could have been done that we didn't do. But I'd have to go back and check that. And it might be that we didn't give you enough options for a capital. That might be.
But let's say hypothetically we approved, let's say hypothetically we approved $780,000 worth of additional projects.
Yeah.
But only 708,000 was done. What are the projects that we had approved, but in the end didn't happen in 2000?
Oh, that
17.
you funded and didn't happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. They would still be in that graph. They would just be, if we didn't get them done in 2017, they'd be carried forward to 2018.
So would they be still attributed to the 2017 budget?
Yeah, we would still call that 2017 capital allocated in that year.
So
Yeah.
when they're done, does that change that number?
No, I'm gonna check that with the director of finance and come back with an answer at the next meeting. That help?
So I'm still feeling that somehow
Yes.
I'm not understanding what are the things that we thought were going to get done last year that in fact are not going to be done at all.
I don't think we would have stopped any projects that were approved, other than there was a solar project comes to mind from Carbon that we were going to do, and there was two of them on the books actually that we collapsed in favor of moving it forward to this year. I'm not aware of any other projects that were approved that we don't intend to follow through on. Are you?
I'm not, but I'm just kind of mystified what happened to that money, and will this number change? And
Well, that money got allocated to operational costs. So we can give you a list of the things we spent on the options list last year that were operational in nature, like $36,000 for rail insurance. We put money into economic development. We put money into fire. I think we put money into celebrating the 50th anniversary of the amalgamation.
so
Things like that.
were some of those monies we were thinking were originally going to be infrastructure, and in fact they were operational?
Well,
And so you
yeah,
just
that's
shifted
right.
it from one sort of category to the other? Is
Yes, yeah. So that 930 that we showed you was contingent on all of the money on the options list going to infrastructure, not to operations.
that okay?
And likewise, all of this money has to go, this 800,000 has to go to infrastructure to make that $1.1 million figure.
So it's just a new definition, is what you're saying,
Yeah.
or a redefinition?
Redefinition, sure.
Okay, Councillor McClement.
Yeah, I wish I could redefine my bank account too, and then we
I'm
could save
thinking
all
that
kinds
this
of
is, you
money.
know, here I'll
Uh,
turn my
have to-
my
Interested to see how
budget
that
already.
works. The other question I've got on that subject
Yeah.
is I noticed when reading through, and I presume this is what you called there were several projects like the mayor is talking about that weren't done in 2017 and be deferred to 2018, other things taken out of 2018, put to 19 and things like that. The capital projects we did not get done in 2017 and were deferred to this year, was that because of time? And if that was because of time, what are we doing wrong in making our scheduling? Because we're going to be more behind her by the end of this year because we're going to be putting some more things on it. If it wasn't because of time, then that's cool, but I'm just curious.
Some might be from time, some are project specific. I can tell you ran into some challenges, design challenges on some that just caused us to have to come back to council. And for example, we talked about the Stamp Avenue bike path. We ran into problems there. We had a pedestrian path on Beaver Creek between Compton and Indian Avenue that but at the design stage we ran into challenges there. So there's a number of projects that have been delayed because we've come into hurdles on the way through. And there's other ones that there's at least one on Johnson Road that we put on hold pending the outcome of a grant application. There's at least one water main project we put on hold pending the outcome of a grant application. So rather than spend our money, we wait to see if we can spend grant funds. So there's different reasons why different projects get put on hiatus. But the manager of operations would be happy to answer that when he gets back from holidays.
Okay, Councillor Minions.
Do you think that will become more and more frequent as we cut our budget further and further operating to not be able to get the projects done that we need to get done? I know that's a very speculative question.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge that we've been facing for a number of years, right? We've been backlogged on projects for a number of years. A certain amount of backlog is healthy because it, carrying projects over into the early part of the year gives us projects to work on with funding that's approved until this budget is approved. So rather than come for early approval of projects, we've already got some that we continue to work on. But there's a point where it becomes not effective, right?
But there is that one slide that you had, the annual infrastructure expenditures.
Yeah.
You can see as we go forward, there's significant additional money available the further down the list, down the years we go.
Yeah.
So 2022, $2.8 million, almost $2.9 million available.
Mm-hmm.
Would we have to staff up in order to be able to do that value of projects?
If we get to that amount of money available for infrastructure or capital projects, we're gonna have a nice challenge. Do we staff up or do we contract out more? If we're paving more streets, that's the paving part is a contract service, right? So it depends where we're targeting that money, where we're focusing it. Is it on paving streets? Is it on something, sidewalks? Is it on something that our own crews do? But we may end up in a situation if we're successful in this budget approach, we may end up in a situation that we already find ourselves in to say we don't have enough resources internally to undertake all the capital. So do we want to staff up to be a project? You want a projects crew, a construction crew, or are you going to contract out more? That's a discussion we'll continue to have with our union as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McClement?
Okay, I don't know if this question is timely yet or not, but going through the budget, and you're going in the planning department, did that include the bylaw function?
Sorry, I thought I had more time.
Well, you can have to take the drink up there. I know what it's like to stand there and talk. I did it yesterday. It wasn't a lot of fun.
The bylaw, the planning budget you saw includes the current bylaw resources. It does not include any increase in bylaw. That's on the options list here.
Okay, because you have a report which may increase some of that. So I was
Yes.
wondering where that's going to be reflected.
That'll be reflected when we get to this options list. It's on page 3, I think, of the options
Oh.
list. And it's not a capital cost, it's an operating cost.
Well, I understand that.
Yeah, no, I was looking somewhere else.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, onward.
Onward.
So this is the options list. So I'll overview some of these projects. The Grandview Walkway project that council's aware of, we estimate $100,000 cost, all of it coming from general revenue. The truck route phase 2 draft options. So we have recently received the data on the truck counts that I mentioned earlier. And I believe those are going to come to you at next week's council meeting. And the data is very raw. It's spreadsheets. And if we want to go to the next phase, we need somebody to synthesize that for us and put it in terms that are easily understood and present some options for us. So if we want to pursue that project, we suggest that a $40,000 report, basically to synthesize that data and come back with recommendations. And so for each of these, you can ask more questions at future meetings if you like. At this point, we just want you to understand what the project entails. Number 3, 6th Avenue, Melrose to Bruce Street. PTP means prior to paving. I've learned that this year. As you know, in our spreadsheets, we break out the projects in different categories. So the category for paving, 6th Avenue between Melrose and Bruce, is $280,000. And you'll see below on storm, the storm water piping would be $150,000 if we did those 2 blocks. Inside the draft capital plan, which we haven't looked at yet, there's, I believe, 3 more blocks of 6th Avenue from Argyle to Melrose. So the 3 most critical blocks in terms of paving are already in the draft budget. So we're planning, if that budget gets approved by council, we would undertake that project this year, and we would do all the engineering for that full 5 blocks, and we would repave and repipe the first 3 blocks, and then come back in a subsequent year for this. But if council approves both of those items, the paving and the storm, we would do all 5 blocks this year. So that's an option for you. We didn't know that we could put all that we didn't think we could get all that into the capital budget, and we thought if we did that, it would leave very little leeway for council. So we're giving you the option, if you like, to do 5 blocks instead of 3.
What's most efficient? Or does it make any difference?
I think you need to ask the manager of operations that, because we're tying in pipes at the bottom end, we're gonna have to do all the engineering anyway, so that when we're building road at the top end of the hill, later on when we connect them, they actually connect. And so we'll have to undertake the engineering anyway, but you might ask the manager of operations if there's efficiencies in doing them all at once or doing them in 2 phases.
Because I'm just thinking, and I'm not an engineer, know nothing about that, but I'm just thinking that in terms of tie-in, there's probably a logical tie-in at either end of this 5-block section. So does it make more sense to redo everything in between those 2 tie-ins rather than cut it part way and then do it again and then?
Yeah, in a perfect world, our crews tell us that they'd rather start downhill and work up, as they've been doing. And so they, at the bottom end, would be connecting to new pipes. But because the road has failed so badly at the top end of that hill, that is critical. That paving part is critical. So we need to get that work done in 2018. And we promise people we'll get that done. But you need to talk to the manager of operations about this project.
Okay. Councillor Minions?
Thank you. I'm just going from my memory, but was the Grandview Walkway project not $20,000 last year on our budget option list?
30.
It was a smaller amount, and you might recall the manager of operations said that it would be very short or very narrow. That's a fair distance, and we couldn't have touched it for that amount. And I think that amount was based on a grant from ICBC, or we had a partial grant at the time.
Okay.
We
So
made
this is more of a actual number of what it would cost.
Yes.
But that doesn't include
filling in the ditch or anything like that. That's just,
My understanding is it's a gravel path on the opposite side of the ditch. But again, the manager of operations can tell you more about the details. It says
Okay.
they're a gravel path.
thank you.
Thanks. Scrolling down, Davina, please, the traffic upgrades. So we've inherited from Ministry of Transportation, I understand, a traffic light controller at 10th and Redford, which we're recommended by our contractor to replace rather than wait for it to fail. He thinks it's on its last legs. And the price estimation is $25,000.
Sorry,
Sorry?
sorry for the ignorance, but
Yeah.
what is a traffic light controller?
It's if you'll notice that intersection is a big stainless box on one of the corners,
Yeah.
and inside there's basically a big computer motherboard or circuits that control all the electronics of that intersection lights, and that's on its last legs, I understand.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
On number 6, so you'll recall that in 2016 we had exercise coastal response, a simulated earthquake and tsunami in the region, and one of the recommendations on the review report was that we undertake a risk assessment to see if our city works yard is at risk, both from earthquake and from tsunami. It is quite low in elevation. We had an item in our 5-year plan to seismically upgrade the buildings at the works yard, and we pulled that out in favor of this because we think there's not a lot of sense in moving forward with trying to bolster those buildings if it turns out they're in the wrong location. So we would like to undertake a third-party review of the location and the risk and see if there's a risk that can be mitigated on that site or not. And with that amount of money, we may be able to have a consultant identify 2 or 3 potential locations if we were to move the works yard. So it's a necessary step in moving that project forward.
Mr. Mayor?
Councillor?
Okay, Councillor Alberni?
Can you, I'm just, for my own notes as I'm going through, I'm trying to mark which are capital, which are operating.
Yep.
I would assume that would be an operating.
Yes, I would assume that in operating, but I'll check with the Director of Finance. And for the next meeting, we'll come back with some indication of what's operating and what's infrastructure. Good to go on?
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm going to ask other staff to come up and speak to other projects.
I'm not the best speaker yet, but we'll get there. So the Fall Fair grounds, the fencing project, it was due to a lot of falls and trips and hazards. And now that we have a new trail in there, we want to keep people diverted to go into the new trailing system. And the Fall Fair Committee supported the idea of throwing a 6-foot fence along the bank from the tractor poles right to their backside of their buildings. It's about 1,000 feet.
Is that a chain link fence we're talking about?
Yes, it'd be a chain link fence.
Okay.
And they're committed to paying half of the bill for $12,500.
Our jobs kind of blend together a little bit here, so we might spell each other off here. So the next item we have up there is the Harbor Key playground area windbreak. And if you're familiar with Harbor Key, which I'm sure you all are, right next to the kids' playground, the ship, there's that old windbreak there that's made out of 12 by 12 pressure-treated lumber, and it's got black sand sheeting in there that's pretty well smoked out and clouded and scratched up and all the rest. It's a real eyesore, and so I'm looking to replace that with something similar structure that's windbreak in the Spirit Square and also around the Starboard Grill restaurant. So it's made out of aluminum and tempered glass.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it'd
It would be
be,
a lot more durable,
Oh,
and
yeah.
tempered glass is very durable in itself. We've had
So
very
would
few
those
things
be-
break.
in cement then?
It would be mounted into the cement, yes.
Thank you.
Item number 8 is I think that was 8. The lines don't actually match up all that well. The next item anyhow is the covered eating area. And this is in response to public input. People want covered areas outside to gather underneath so that we can make the quay a little bit more usable in the off months, in the winter months and shoulder seasons. And we're just looking to dress up that area that's directly north of the donut shop. Right now it's a little bit of grass, a little bit of mud, a little bit of gravel. And so we would scrape all that out, put paving stones in there, and put a cover over top of that.
Oh, Councillor Sauvé and Councillor McClement?
Just before we leave the Harkey area to the Millstone Park, the clock tower. I know for the last 2 years we have budgeted something. Is there, if you could remind me, is it repaired? Is it finished project, or are we?
No, it's not a finished project. Where we're at with that is that we've agreed to partner with First Nations on coming up with a design. We just haven't been able to link our schedules together to talk about what we want that to look like.
But we already got that budgeted, right?
Yes, that's
We
all
already got
budgeted,
some
and
funds
that's
set
one of those
aside.
items that Tim was talking about carrying over into the following year.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Do you anticipate that it'll be done before next tourist season?
I'd sure like it to be, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McClement?
Well, I always tell people the clock's right twice a day, but that sort of wears pretty thin after a while. I guess the question I've got, when I put my hand up, was more about the covered eating area. What are you envisioning there? You don't have a lot of money in
Just an open structure, open on the sides. It would be similar to something that we're putting down at the waterfront park, only nowhere near as grand as we've got planned there. So it's basically a rudimentary structure with probably a couple of translucent panes on the top, and the rest would be a metal covered roof.
Okay.
So the Millstone Park, this week will be commencing with the fish rehabilitation area. That's why the park will be closed for probably till almost March 1st. And then after that, we're gonna take it back over and hopefully finish with some new lighting, solar lighting, signage, proper driveway. It was left rough just for the infrastructure to go in for the fish rehabilitation area.
Councillor Sauvé?
Yeah, pertaining to the Millstone Park, I thought this was already budgeted in the last year's budget, that we have a vision of what we wanted there and so forth. Is there something new that we're adding that's costing us?
Well, there
the
was
extra?
never budgeted in for solar lighting, a proper driveway. It wasn't any for signage. I wasn't part of this last year.
Okay, no, I just
and
thought
plus-
we agreed to just make something beautiful
Yep.
there for the waterfront.
Yep.
And now I'm just noticing that we're throwing more money at it.
And we also got quite a healthy contribution of memorial stuff that has to be completed also.
So
And we didn't dip into that area yet.
does this, in this particular phase, does that include the riprap on the bank?
That's what's starting hopefully this week.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
And we got a fish window till February 15th.
And does that include as well I don't know, a hedge against the fence or whatever it is? Because you can see that there's some disturbed soil right there along the
Yep.
chain link fence?
Yep, yep.
So is that to put a hedge in of some sort?
That's correct, yep.
Okay.
And then with the Johnson Road planters, it's from what you guys allowed last year, the planters that were ordered and put on hold. So it's to finish that project of getting the planters done with the nice racks like the guys have done in the past and down below, and adding the irrigation to the boxes and setting them out and ordering the plants and having everything ready to go up further Johnson to approximately Tim Hortons.
Okay. By the way, Christmas time, they look great.
Yeah, the boys put out a lot of extra effort, and I think it's paying off. We're getting a lot of compliments, so it's nice to see.
Yeah.
So for the irrigation for the canal waterfront, it's to be finished this year on last year's budget. We're a little bit behind on stuff we're doing down there. So with the waterfront park pier, I've been getting a lot of inquiries since the park's looking so beautiful. Now we got the pilings out there. So what I'm asking for is to get the pilings assessed and see if they're worth anything, or did they have to be pulled. So one way we could actually build on top if they're in good working order, and we could do a beautiful deck area, and that would be at a further engineering and design. Or if they're that bad, they'll have to be pulled, and that's an environmental study that has to be done to remove them. So I'm kind of going on hopefully the structure idea, because the environmental, I think, will be not as cost effective as a structure on top, which we'll get out. And there's other ideas. If all the pilings don't fit, if we have an open deck area, it's less weight. So, there's a little bit of allowance there. But if they're full capacity, we could have a full deck of complete hard surface.
This $20,000 is just for the investigation?
It's for the investigation of the pilings and hopefully design, or looking into the environmental side of it to remove them.
Okay, Councillor Munoz?
Thank you. Just one back on the Johnston Road planter boxes and irrigation. Have we looked at the option of self-watering planters?
Yes, the desert plants. I've been looking into them, yeah.
Okay. We just had, there was a booth set up at UBCM that had really interesting ones, so might be something to consider in the future.
I've been looking into it, but the irrigation main box is already installed. It's just a matter of putting the leads down. But any further up, as we'd like to go further, it'd be something definitely we'd love to look into.
Awesome.
And get some boxes, the same thing, but get the I call them the Arizona specials, right? So it'd be great. So the other one we have is the Scott Kinney Trail. We revisit it with the biologist and all that to put the fourth bridge in instead of 5. We looked at it where we could save a whack of cash and go with 4 bridges instead of 3 or 5, with a different trail area to go underneath the trestle that's there to connect with Roger Creek Park. And hopefully we're looking also with Westcoast Aquatic to get some more rec fish or equivalent funding for that, or grant money.
So how would that connect with Roger Creek Park?
We'll go right through your house. No, I'm just
That's
joking.
what I was wondering.
No, it's it'll go across, and then initially it was going to go over top of the trestle, and I've been monitoring the tide lines and not the tide lines, but it's caused by tide lines of all the flood and all that. We could actually make it underneath the bridge on the high side, and we'll cut a little bit into the bank to get there. So it's quite a big savings. We'll save half of what we're spending here. So it's just a different idea, different approach, different look, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. You want to do Blair Park? So the other ones are the Blair Park and also Harbor Key. I don't know, is it in there? So the Blair Park and the Harbor Key, both the parks. This is the one for the. Sorry, this is Blair Park just for resurfacing the asphalt. So, and the drainage. So what happened last year, we started getting it started to heave out, and we had some major patching to do last year. And the drainage is getting to be the point where we either fix the drainage or we shut down the park, because they were getting a 2-foot flood in some areas because I guess the big root lines have gone into there. We got a blockage about halfway through. So the idea was we talked to our techs and was to actually, instead of try to repair, we'll just put a brand new line in and then hopefully resurface the area with a cap and have a look at the watering while we're there.
Okay. Councillor McLennan.
Yeah, a good set of reports there, guys, but I got a couple of questions, or actually one main question on several of them, the Harbor Key and the Clock Tower and the Millstone Park particular.
Yeah.
We had some conversations a year or so ago looking at getting some sponsors to do some of that. Did anything come of that, or do we have to pursue it farther with motions or whatever?
Some of them have donated, and some are also standing to actually get more donations given also.
Yeah, because I thought we were getting some particularly in memoriam ones for the Memorial Park, and bricks and stuff like that.
That's
going up.
correct.
So,
Yeah,
okay,
and that's
good.
all part of the hard surface and all that.
Yeah.
Right now, we have gravel, so we'd like to go further with that.
Well, that's good, because I think that, that's
At
what
least
people like
like
to
a
do.
parking area that we could be concreted in with one of the donation people that said they would contribute.
We got an awful lot of benches in Memorial right now.
There's a
Not
couple more
quite
to go.
enough- Not quite enough people to sit on them,
Yeah.
so I'm thinking maybe people could be suggested that they do something else. And the other part with, particularly with Harbor Key, and there's some nice areas there with, well done, but with the clock tower, one of the forest companies about 4 or 5 months ago or more was interested if we talked to them about putting some of the history on of the company from Milne-Bladel on up and as you climb up the thing. Now, I didn't know at that time when I was talking to them, you were talking to the shop, but are they contributing funds to this for what people want, or how are we doing?
That's Mark's project.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, it wouldn't be fair to Sashot to have this conversation in public because we're in the early stages of conversations with them on this project. So if council will indulge, we'd like to be able to keep those conversations confidential.
Okay. But we haven't spent that money yet, right, Mark?
No, we haven't.
All right.
Davina, just to check in, is the late item from McLean Mill the list of capital items, or is it a different item? I've got the list here and, okay. So I'm okay to speak to their list? Okay. So first, under the $100,000 in the McLean Mill capital projects, so there's $130,000 that the Mill Society forwarded on to me. The first item, $55,000, includes $50,000 in track repairs and about $5,000 in vegetation. $25,000 for a mill assessment, which is a 50% share of a grant application that the Society has applied for and likely to receive. So going back to one of the councillor's questions around grant funding, that $25,000 would represent 50% contribution. So our contribution would be $25,000, and then the grant would be another $25,000. A hot water heater would be $4,000. Power and water toward the campground would be $35,000. Various signage throughout the facility, $6,000, and a video projector and screen would be $5,000. So that's a total of $130,000 as an ask. We can, of course, detail that for future council meetings. So you've got the visual?
No, yeah, but it would be nice to have it in a detailed.
Absolutely.
Because right now it just,
It's just numbers
Yeah.
that were thrown around. Yep, absolutely.
We've got Councillor Minions.
Thank you. Is there other capital money from McLean Mill in our budget? I think last year we gave them $125,000. Is that already in our budget and this is additional to that, or is this the $125,000 turned into $131,000?
There's $30,000 currently in the draft financial plan, and that's funds that we anticipate getting from the regional district, and we pass on through to the McLean Mill Society. So there's, in the operating side, there's $175,000. On the capital side, there's $30,000.
Okay. So this is very close to the same as what we contributed last year.
That's correct. Last year, there was 225 on operating versus 175 now, but on the capital ask, it's very similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Sylvie?
sorry, I just need clarification and to know that I understand this. I thought all these funds were already part of the capital, and this is additional wish list, or, you know where I'm getting at? It's because I see us giving so much money and we're trying to really control what money's going to McLean Mill, and then I see a wish list with additional 131. I just need to know.
Mr. Mayor, this is a very similar process to what we followed last year, that there are similar amounts in the draft budget now to what there was last year. And last year, council approved, as I recall, $100,000 extra on capital and $36,000 for insurance. And so this year, it's similar to last year. This money is not, this is an options list. Council can choose to opt it in or opt it out. But you need to ask questions, I would suggest, of McLean Mill Society at subsequent meetings about the project specifically and what the value is, so you can make a decision. And tonight, we just want to point out to you what these items are, not necessarily drill into them.
Okay, so what Will is giving us the numbers, you said it's $130,000 that you're talking about, but we've got a number here that we're looking at of $100,000, so what's the real number?
So the ask from McLean Mill is 130, which is new news as well for myself when I received it. And so what we'll do is we'll delineate. So again, when the options list was created, of course, under the purview that it would be 100,000, that board has since met, and the ask is 130. So the real number would be 130,000, is what the ask is. Again, as CAO implies, that it's council's prerogative, however you wish to spend or not.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Alemany?
So what I'm understanding is the $100,000 number has changed, not the 31,000. We haven't gotten to that
Correct.
yet.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you for being specific. So the 100 that you see on the screen has since come in now at 130. And then now, in addition, we're looking at still 31,000 railway insurance. So if we elect to run the railway similar to last year, then we would be in a situation to look at providing that insurance of 31,000. So all told, the real number we're looking at is 161,000.
But that doesn't include this sheet from
No, and-
extra sheet, the 2.1.
Correct.
Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, I'm looking at Bill Collette, President of the McLean Mill Society in the audience, and he's indicating to me that even though they have showed us $130,000 with the projects, they're not asking to increase that $100,000 number. So that they've just demonstrated the projects that are on their minds. So they're not asking to increase the 100,000 at this point. They do have a late item that they want to consider later in the meeting of another request, but those numbers are what they've asked.
So if I might suggest, before we sit down for the next budget meeting, I'll reach out and we'll get a prioritized list from the group to know what the prioritized 100,000 value.
I'd definitely like to know what the real number is. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You read my mind because she mentioned campground, she mentioned track repair. I'd like to see it where, maybe we'll spend it on track, but we won't do campground because it'll put revenue in their pocket, and I'd like to just see it broken down.
And from my perspective, I'd rather say, as council, this is what we can afford. You guys figure out what it is that you're going to devote it to, because as council, I can't imagine that we would want to deal with the minutia of the decisions that they have to make.
Agreed?
Okay.
Are we okay to move forward? Excellent.
So we'll
In the spirit of efficiency?
We'll leave it as a fluid amount at this point.
Excellent. So moving down to Parks, Recreation, and Facilities. So the first item, top pool repairs. So this represents replumbing the top pool. So similar to 3 to 5 years ago, where we jackhammered the pool deck at the hot tub, replaced the plumbing, we're looking at a similar situation. So the top pool is not currently leaking. It's to avoid that situation. So the $7,500 would be to replumb the existing top pool. The two items under the fitness studio there, the recumbent bike replacement, as well as the floor replacement and the wall painting. So the recumbent bike is still in working order. It is past its recommended end of life. As far as the impact, if we don't look to replace that, you'll know that we have a fairly small fitness studio with limited number of pieces of equipment. So it's definitely something that would be noticed by community if it weren't there. Regarding the studio floor and the painting of the wall, the floor is 20 years old, so it's at a stage where it's difficult to keep it clean and looking sharp as it used to. And the idea about the aesthetics of painting is, while we're in there tearing up a floor, it makes a lot of sense to deal with the wall there as well.
Are we not facing the situation where we're getting to the end of the natural life of this facility, and do we patch it or with something that's good for 3 or 4 or 5 years, or do we actually replace it so it's good for another 20? And what makes sense here?
Absolutely, and just as you indicated, it's that balance of determining how do we continue to function as efficiently and proactively as we can. Until we know what that magic number might be on an aquatic center replacement. This is all part of the diligence to keep us sustainable, instead of arriving one day and saying, oh goodness, we didn't take the accurate steps in something like the top pool, and now it's done. So our preschool lessons can't function for swimming lessons. Now the facility starts to close and it ends up in that snowball. So I'm confident that once we know a date where we're looking at what the actual lifespan of that aquatic center will need to be, once we know essentially when that replacement date is, then the conversation will start to shift to exactly that. At this stage, we're continuing business as normal. When we're at a stage where we're not, and we're saying when the aquatic center needs to survive until X date, then absolutely we won't be talking about things like painting walls and some of the aesthetics, because we're just trying to hang on until replacement.
But that final date isn't going to become really clear until we ramp up the urgency. So it's difficult to get serious about those discussions and those negotiations until we really know how urgent it is.
Agreed, and that's why I'm pleased to have a meeting with our CAO and the regional district tomorrow to
Good.
discuss that item.
Thank you.
So if I'm okay to move on to the multiplex ice edger. So this would be replacing our current gas-powered asset with a battery-operated option. So this is considered an equipment upgrade. So again, it's still, our current model is still functioning. Existing unit, for food for thought, would have 2 cutting blades, where upgrades would have something like 8 cutting blades. The impact if we don't keep up on things like our ice edgers is actually the way we can get into discussions about ice resurfacing at a later date, but we run into an effect called a bowl effect, essentially. And so actually the functionality of your ice resurfacer, your Zamboni, if you're not edging properly, your entire ice surface will diminish as a result. The last item that I just wanted to touch on as well, of those top 4 that I've spoken to, so 17 to 20 as far as priorities go, I would strongly suggest we explore the top pool repair as the first priority of the 4 that I've discussed.
Okay, Councillor Washington and Councillor Minions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our old ice edger, is it worth anything? Does that include a trade-in, or is it scrap, or can some other community buy it off us? Or?
There may be a chance. I don't see it worth a ton, but of course we'll exhaust those opportunities either on a BC bid type of landscape. We're also approaching other facilities. We can't afford just to send items out the back.
Okay, Councillor Minions and Councillor Alamani.
Thank you. Just wondering if the ice edger is something that could come from like the Carbon Reserve Fund, because it's going from gas to electric.
At this stage, I don't see that it really impacts carbon footprint per se. I can check back in with our Director of Finance and we can explore, but at this stage we weren't expecting it to.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alamani.
I had the same question as Councillor Minions.
Oh, yeah. Councillor Sorbe.
One question about the pool issue. If the city manager could help me out on this. In the past years, we had some surpluses from certain departments. We put the money into, I believe, it's land reserve, or was it? Because there was discussion, the mayor spoke about, investing in our new pool and so forth. And I thought we had like $250,000 placed somewhere special for that.
Councillor, are you referring to the Parks and Rec Reserve?
Could be. Just need a reminder where those funds, there was an RCMP surplus several years ago, and they went to a special fund. And
I believe we have some funds in a reserve fund for a new pool. And we can get that exact amount at a future meeting if you like.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll talk about City Hall there. You guys are all pretty familiar with the goings on around here. So first of all, the phase 1 rental. What I'm looking to do is replace the flooring, basically the carpet area and all the public access areas with tile. And in the engineering section, replace their worn out carpet with carpet tiles similar to the upstairs office. And that'll be it for that portion this year. The east side retaining wall and landscaping and the exterior improvements, basically just tying in all of the good work that we did outside of the building, painting over the old yellow paint, probably go with a gray color that's tie it all together. Same with the landscaping, the planter boxes, the retaining wall along the south side and along the east side parking lot and the alley.
This says multiplex east side retaining wall and landscaping.
Oh, I'm sorry. Getting ahead of myself. Okay, the multiplex east side retaining wall. What's happening there is that bank is slowly leaching away into the parking lot, and so we basically just want to put a retaining wall in there, about a 3-foot retaining wall, right throughout the whole east side of the parking lot, and also to improve the access from the upper parking lot and athletic hall down into the multiplex area. Just make that a more permanent structure rather than the wood structure that's in there now.
So is that a cement retaining wall?
Cement, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I spoke to the city hall improvements there. Yeah, we've got that broken out into a couple of different items there. The feature lighting, what I anticipate there is just trying to improve the aesthetics of City Hall, and that would be adding LED lighting probably out off the roof and an arm facing downward, so it would light up the side of the building. And the way LED lighting is progressing now, you could choose your color. So if special events come along where, say, you wanted the building to appear pink or purple, or in the Christmas season, you could alternate it between green and red, or just white for the rest of the year, or whatever you want, whatever color you wanted to choose. Just it's a nice improvement for the aesthetics of the building.
What's the paint and stain for City Hall exterior improvements?
That's painting over all what's currently yellow on the outside of the building. It's weathered, and it's in need of a freshen up. So, yeah.
It's cream.
Well, cream.
So, no, I'm just kidding. Is one of the options just to simply remove that paint?
No, it's some of it's well, we have to assume it's lead because it's several coats over several years. So we always test it beforehand, but I would assume it's lead, and the best thing to do with lead is just cover it back up.
Okay.
Keep it intact.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Sobey.
Pertaining to the City Hall, this was a prior budget. I just need to know how we are to the plan and if we're budgeted all right for the elevator for City Hall for our seniors and people with...
It's on track. The elevator's under construction right now, working with a contractor to start at the end of this month to build the stairwell.
Okay, so there's no surprises?
No surprises there, no.
Okay, thank you.
Got until the end of March to finish that up.
Will that include new front doors?
Yes.
So then
automatic front doors.
They'll be more energy efficient than what we currently have?
Yes, manpower.
There's this much gap there, 12 months a year? Must lose a lot of heat through that gap.
Yes. Fresh air, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. Got to keep the fresh air in it.
I'm just thinking it's a really good thing we're in Port Alberni and not Montreal, because it's a lot of air coming through there. Okay, thank you.
I'll be the last.
CAO, I bet this one's yours.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So next week, council will, at our council meeting next week, a report written November 1st, Big City Problems in Port Alberni, will be in front of council again. There's a number of recommendations in that report, some of which have costs attached to them, and so we've added to the options list for council's consideration those options. And number 26, it is essentially to create a bylaw enforcement department, which would be 2.5 new personnel to add to our currently 1 personnel. Also 27 would be $70,000 for some equipment for those, a vehicle for that department, and we would have to make some changes to City Hall to accommodate those extra employees. And number 28, there's a proposal in that report that the city consider an incentive program for security of private property, and there's a $25,000 value in the report, so that we've reflected that here. But these are for council's consideration.
Okay, Councillor Sobey and then Councillor McClellan.
City Manager, if you could elaborate on the Bylaw equipment and vehicle. I'm just thinking of the vehicle. The city has invested so much into these electric outlets and all that. Can we not benefit from a carbon tax fund to obtain that vehicle? instead of putting this on the,
Mr. Mayor, I think that's a reasonable question, and I think we should consider that, and we'll bring that information to the next meeting.
Or some other vehicle that maybe is underused?
A current vehicle, you mean?
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know that we have an underutilized vehicle, but I could ask.
Okay. Councillor McClellan?
Yeah, security lighting incentive, I presume that's like a grant for something like our facade program? Is that-
Correct, yeah, yes.
So I'm wondering if we could add to that, or the wisdom of adding to that, and maybe someone can answer the question next week, security cameras as well. I've been around to a lot of the businesses lately, Mr. Mayor, and there's a few of them that are getting together and putting them out in strategic places to assist us, and I guess the RCMP, if they were to call them and see something they saw. So there are some businesses we know have them and have them very well displayed. They're not hidden, they're there. And others are thinking of doing the same. So I'm just wondering if it's a possibility to talk about that, if there's any wisdom in that.
I've also had some business owners who don't have the money to pay for security cameras, but are strategically located, and if they had one on their building, it could be potentially really useful. So, anything else, Council? And so the bylaw equipment and vehicle, re-examine that and come back with a clearer, tighter.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we'll come back with some options.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Sobey?
just one question to the CAO, and I think you gave me the answer before. This is for the public. The sewage lagoon project, I understand we had a deadline in 2018 for the grants and so forth, and how is the project going? Is that going to affect the budget in any way, and are we still qualified for those grants?
Mr. Mayor, the sewage lagoon project is taking longer than we'd hoped, and we're in the process of applying for extensions to the 2 grants. And it's our expectation that we'll get those extensions, and then we'll look to have that project completed before spring of 2019. And at this point, there's no indication that there'd be an impact on this budget.
Okay, but we have applied for a couple of grants that could have impact on our staffing time, the Strategic Priorities Fund. And I know we don't know what the result of those applications is going to be, but they, certainly impact on what we get done and how we get it done, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I don't think there's anything else under the supplementary projects list. And the council will have an opportunity to add to that in D, council review. So council, that brings us to 2.1, which is a request from Mr. Collette for us to consider a couple of extra things. So Mr. Collette, at this point, I'll invite you to come up and just describe to council what you want us to consider. For those that aren't aware, Bill Collette is chair of the McLean's Mill Society. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor and Council. Basically, what we're looking to do is just adjust our operational ask from the 175 that is currently on your budget back to 200,000, which is what we had presented. I think it was March 1st of 2017. So that still represents an 11% drop over 2017. So we'd like to be back at the 200,000.
Question, there is, we were shown the November budget and it showed a $176,000 surplus.
Well, yeah, I realize that's a little bit misleading. There's lots of invoices that had not yet been entered, so we're probably finishing the year with maybe $15,000 in the bank at the most. Once we get all of our invoices paid, we're waiting for a bunch actually from the IHS that we received some notice of them, but so we're thinking at the most we've got about 15,000 carryover.
Okay, so Deanna Baudouin told us that we could expect a final statement sometime in March or early April. Are you still on track for that?
Oh, yeah, we should be, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councillor Sauvé?
Are we able to research and wait to make any type of decision on this, or is this an urgent matter? Or is it something you're just requesting for?
You know, we're working on our budget. You know, just for clarity's sake, in 2017, we operated with $225,000 from the city. We operated with the 125 capital grant, and the city provided the insurance. So that's what we received in 2017. For 2018, we're actually asking for less in total. So I'd like to clarify that. It seemed to be a little bit confusing earlier. The total capital ask for 2017, which we received, was $125,000. The capital ask for 2018 works out to $130,000. So it's a $5,000 difference in total. The operational ask in 2017 was $225,000. Right now in your budget plan, you're listing it at $175,000, which is a 22% decrease. That's problematic for us to be able to manage a 22% decrease. However, what we presented in March, I think it was, again, March 1st, was $200,000, which is an 11% decrease over 2017. We're prepared to deal with that and work with that.
Okay.
And then, of course, the insurance is additional to that.
Yeah, but I agree with the mayor that, you know, I was under the impression anyways, and not that I'm a whiz in economics, but I was under the impression we were in this surplus. And to see this ask was just kind of confusing for me. So I'm looking forward to the final report to see the true numbers and all that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Minions and then Councillor Alaman.
Thank you. I'm wondering where did the 200,000 to 175, where did that change come from?
You know, we're not really sure. You know, whether we have to look in the mirror and whether the mistake was ours or not, I really can't say. But on March 1st, when we presented our budget, we were focused obviously on 2017. We had 5 years sitting there in the paper, and we either didn't notice that it had been moved down to 175 or whether it got moved down subsequent to that, not sure. But our intent always was to drop it annually, which we've done and which we are continuing to present you with. So $225,000 in 2017, our ask is $200,000 in 2018, 11% decrease.
Okay, thanks for the clarity. I think personally, I think we kind of bought into the plan that you guys brought forward last year with the 5-year dropping down, cutting to 50% over the 5 years. I certainly wasn't anticipating that we would be giving out less than that plan. So
yeah,
I just was curious
that
if you guys had reduced that or if it was a mistake or if it came from us or where it came from.
Somewhere along the line, we're not really sure how it happened, but to clarify, 5 years, we are at the 50% and that's maintained. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. CAO and then just to
Mr. Mayor, if I can shed some light on that point. Early in 2017, when McLean Mill Society had just been developed and they were, quite frankly, scrambling to develop a 5-year financial plan because we were saying we need your numbers because we're building, because of our budget timelines. January 30th, we got 5-year projections from McLean Mill Society, which were very raw because they were so new. We put them into our draft budget, and subsequently, when MMS made a presentation to council, they had changed some of the numbers, and none of us picked up that they had their 5-year projections. Even though they were still committed to a 50% reduction, they had changed the pace with which they get there. And really, the only number I think they changed was 2018. Nobody picked up that was a new ask, and it wasn't reflected in the budget. Council never had a chance to consider that change, so we adopted the original numbers that had 175, and it was only recently that McLean Mill Society said they were banking on 200 this year. So I would suggest it's nobody's fault. It's a factor of the rapidity with which McLean Mill Society had to come up to speed. And I know that they've deliberated extensively about whether to even approach council on this because they value the trust of the city so greatly. And so if council wants to consider this at a future date, I would suggest you put this on the options list for future consideration.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alberni?
Thank you. My questions have been asked, or have been answered, I think. So I guess I would just, request that be put on the options list so that we can make that change if we need to, or deliberate on it, whatever we need to do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McLemmon, did you have your hand up? Councillor Sauvé?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Alberni. It's just, it's getting frustrating with these, when we have everything planned, and then we get these surprises, which just puts up in a loop when it comes to the budgetary reasons. So anyways, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Looks like we've got some additions to the options list. Thank you. So, Council, that brings us to Part C then. This is an opportunity for public, for input, questions. I bet we have one group that wants to talk to us. Yes, please come forward. And certainly you can. And just to help us remember, if you could do introductions for us so that we know, even though we've seen you before, it is possible we won't remember your names.
Hi, so we're from the Social Justice 12 class at ADSS. I'm Morgan Williams.
And I'm Emily Bunt.
I'm Gracie Mitchell.
And I'm Maddie O'Neill-Johns.
So, we, the Social Justice 12 class, feel that having a youth liaison officer is incredibly important to our community. We not only want to keep our current 34 members, but add another member dedicated to the youth liaison officer position. We have done the math, and to compensate for the salary of this officer, $167,000 a year, each residential property taxpayer would only have to pay $1.80 more per month. This is less than a medium cup of Tim Hortons coffee a month or a case of beer a year. We currently have the support of the Chief of Police and full support of our administration, as well as 264 petition on paper and 164 online signatures for our Cup for a Cop petition. This petition to raise taxes by $1.80 a month is still open, and you can Google a Cup for a Cop petition and sign it. And this request is for the 2018 tax year. Research done by Carleton University professors and PhD students in Toronto, which you may have seen on the media, supports having youth officers in schools. Please refer to the handout we gave at the beginning of tonight's meeting. Within the city of Port Alberni, there are a total of 34 municipally funded officers. They police the city of Port Alberni's 18,000 people. This is a ratio of RCMP to citizens at 1 to 529. Our school has 1,232 staff and students, making our ratio 0 to 1,232. The repercussions of not having a officer here at ADSS result in less drugs being seized on campus, increased amounts of serious bullying issues, and decrease of legal information on consent both off and online. If a student goes to administration to report an assault or rape when there is no youth liaison officer within the school, all the administration is able to do is call the police. If there isn't an officer on duty that is familiar with the high school and youth clientele, the student is told to go to the police station themselves or is sent back to class to wait until an officer is available to come. If a youth liaison officer is in Valley schools when a student goes to report an incident like this, they are either already available at ADSS or can be called within minutes. The youth liaison officer is so much more than a police officer. The officer is able to educate youth of chargeable offenses due to the fact that at age 14, a youth can have a criminal record. Not all RCMP have the right personality to work with youth. When a student has experienced trauma, they need support, not a police officer going through a checklist. Our previous youth liaison officer would know that a student would feel more comfortable talking over coffee and would take them to a separate space. Having an officer from regular duty does not allow for a relationship between students and officer. The Social Justice 12 class has been working very hard to have a dedicated youth liaison officer for the Valley schools. We are now here asking the city of Port Alberni for a tax increase directed to the RCMP. We strongly recommend that they value the youth in our community enough to increase taxes by $1.80 a month and to earmark these extra funds towards the Cut for a Cop campaign and the future of Port Alberni. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Out of curiosity, don't you already have a youth liaison officer, a school liaison officer attached to the RCMP?
We do, but it's not a dedicated fund for the officer, so it can be removed at any time.
And he's currently removed right now.
And he's currently removed right now.
Are you saying Jamie's not available to you
That's
at this
correct.
point?
That's correct.
He's given to other things?
He's at regular duty right now.
So whose decision is that?
That's Brian Hunter's.
That's the inspector's decision.
Yeah.
So would that change at all under a new budget?
We're talking about dedicating funds to a youth liaison officer, so there would always be funds.
But what would happen with that position? Wouldn't that always be the inspector's decision?
Yes.
Yes, but
Okay.
if we had the additional funds, then he would probably be able to do that.
Okay. But it's, just to be clear, whether you're principal in the school or whether you're inspector in the RCMP, you get to choose how you're going to some extent, allocate your staff resources.
Absolutely. We're just saying it would be more likely if we had the funds.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Councillor McLennan?
So, I was just looking, is this a request to appeal as well to do it, or do they already have it and this is an assessment of what they're doing? Your folder says Appeal Regional Police, that's Ontario.
Oh, yes, that study was done by Carleton University in Ontario, and it's showing how important a youth liaison officer is in schools and how students feel safer and more comfortable at school when there is a police officer in the schools.
And do you envision this individual, if we funded him for these, it's really hard to convince people to spend that case of beer a year, by the way, in case you thought that was easy. I've tried it before, and we didn't succeed. But do you look at this as someone just for the ADSS or in the other schools in the valley? And what is the what are you actually looking for that you don't have now, I guess?
Well, we would consider it would be more for high school students, so more just for ADSS, just because we're getting to that age where you're being exposed to all these different things. We're actually growing up and we're becoming real world citizens. It's not like, I think that like kindergarten to grade 12, it's your trial life, right? You have like a free trial, like a Netflix subscription. It's a free trial, right? All of your mistakes, and you're just learning. Pretty much, well, if you think about it. And so we're thinking the youth liaison officer is such a positive role model in high schools because he's showing you the person that we all want to be. And he's being able to establish those relationships with students, and it's so invaluable. And actually, if you turn to the last page of that booklet, there's quotes from staff administration and students and the youth liaison officer at that school. I think it's at the very last page there. Yeah, the very back.
Okay.
In the bottom half of it, there's quotes from interviews with people, and it's just there's more of a connection between the heart and the money, and I find there's always a disconnect there. But if you read those quotes, it really shows you how amazing it is to have somebody there.
And just to add on to that, the youth liaison officer is available to all the Valley schools at any time. So if there was an incident in one of the elementary schools, he could be there within minutes.
Right. Especially since there's too few of them than there were a few years ago. Okay, Councillor Minions.
Thank you. Thank you for the information. I was actually not aware that we didn't have a youth liaison officer still. So really good to hear what actually what we have right now. And I certainly see the value in it. I'm wondering if more a question for Inspector Hunter, or maybe he could provide us with some information at an upcoming meeting, how long we haven't had one. If we were to dedicate funds, would we be able to guarantee having one, or would those resources be spent somewhere else? Basically, what does it look like to do something about this issue? Is there a halfway where we can dedicate that we have one at least sometimes, or just sort of what's the actual operational side of this? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Council? Councillor Sobey?
Thank you very much for your presentation. I, for one, could see how essential it is, and I know the constable personally and the work that he does at the high school, especially when I do the breakfast club and seeing him in the area, it does a difference, not only for the security aspect of things, but as a role model. It's often said that the police are just police or enforcing the law, but they have many duties, as in counseling and helping people and so forth. I'm not blaming the inspector for allocating his resources for the proper areas, which are more of a priority in the city, is totally understandable. And I know how much of a big hole it does when it's missing at the high school level, where with the social needs is big in this community, just like any other community. Days have changed, that it's really essential to have that, especially for youth. And when council, when I'm seeing that we're cutting a position in the next year, it just simply doesn't make sense to me. So I really encourage you to keep on fighting for this, and I support you, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, girls, quick question. When did this officer stop being available, school liaison?
Early December.
Yeah, we were informed of it last month.
We were informed on the 11th of December, but I'm not.
A couple of days
It
before
was a
that.
couple days before that it was removed.
So essentially just happened. So he was with you, because I remember running into him in the fall and talking to him in the fall.
Yeah, he
at
was
school.
with us. He was.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, he's a great resource. Okay, Councillor Alberni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. Great information. And I agree. I think the high school especially it is a trial on life, and having a daughter in the high school at this point, she's experiencing things that I didn't experience at high school. Times have changed, and all that kind of stuff. You've heard all that kind of stuff before. My question, I guess, as far as the budget would go, would be, how does this affect that 2019 budget line item? Is this a matter of dedicating that item to youth policing potentially, and then reorganizing the budget for policing going forward, or is this a direction that we would give to the RCMP as far as keeping that youth officer there? So that's something that we'll have to come to.
And whether it's full-time and dedicated to the high school only, or part-time and dedicated to the high school only, or just, a whole lot of it is, there's discussions not just with the RCMP inspector, but also with district and school administration, and because in the end, we have to figure out how it's going to be paid for. And I know that you look on it as maybe it's a case of beer a year, but on the other hand, some people, they see that as being pretty trite. It might not be when you're, depending upon whether you're paying for it or whether you're at the receiving end. So it's important to place all those considerations. And certainly, as you know, I was a principal at high school for a while, and I recognize how important it is. But I recognize how important everybody is that's both a student at the school and works at the school. So everybody contributes, and how do we make it all work together? So I really appreciate the time that you put into this, presenting your thoughts and presenting with us with another consideration. So thank you so much, girls.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. Council, is there another group or suggestion from the audience that, yes, please come forward. And I believe you're Emily.
Yes, I'm Emily. It's just me this time.
Okay, Emily.
Okay, so I wasn't planning on speaking alone tonight. However, throughout the meeting, I was inspired. And I would like to take a moment to remind Council of their opportunities and the excitement we must all share going forward. We have the opportunity to change at any moment, and sometimes it may be scary. Revolutionizing this town the way I know we are capable can be terrifying, but the thing is that choosing the option that scares us is also the option that will help us grow. I am learning, now more than ever, that finances are excruciatingly stressful, as I am going to embark on my journey through post-secondary education. So recently someone told me that you're never ready. You simply say, I'm going, and then proceed to go without any idea where or how fast, and anything can happen, and that terrifies me. The thing is, regardless of how freaked out I am, I'm taking the chance, and I would love to see Council do the same moving forward. So let's revolutionize Port Alberni, work towards a bright, promising, and sustainable future. With all of this infrastructure we are wanting to rebuild, why not rebuild it in a way that we can benefit from in the long term? So for example, the windbreaker at the Harbor Quay and the Scott Kenny Bridge. So there's solar technology that produces energy and reduces greenhouse gas emissions due to this clean energy production. So why not use this opportunity and rebuild the bridge and windbreaker with this technology, because climate change is a threat to each and every one of us. And I believe that Port Alberni is a wonderful place to promote sustainability. I know that you, like myself, are willing to fight for our future in this world, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting in front of me today. So I know we have a beautiful future ahead of us if we simply work together to make it so. And there are also lots and lots of grants for renewable energy, and I think why not get the free money, right? But it was just an idea that came up while we were talking about that.
Well, thank you, because, you know, through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, there are some really interesting grants available for municipalities all across Canada. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens that one of the people who makes those decisions lives here in the Alberni Valley. Really? And is a great friend of Port Alberni. So we do actually rely on him from time to time to come up with suggestions for exactly that sort of thing. Yeah. So thank you for that suggestion. Councillor Alameda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Emily. That was really well put. I agree with everything you said. I would just like to add that the Food Security and Climate Disruption Committee will be turning over many members at the end of this year, at the end of 2018. And if you or anyone else at the high school would like to be a member of that committee, you know, that would be a fantastic place for you to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sobey?
Your teacher present here?
She's right there, yeah.
Okay. You could guarantee me an A+ for each one of these students today?
Thank you.
Thank you. You deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address council? Okay, so then council, that brings us to the review. This is our last opportunity to add into the options list. After tonight, we're hoping to make a decision based on what we have in front of us. Is there anybody, any council member of council wish to add to the list? Councillor McClement?
No, I don't think I want to add to the list, Mr. Mayor. I think it's 50% dollars we're looking at already in the options, I guess.
Almost, yeah.
But I do have a question I'd like addressed during this budget discussion, and you brought it up earlier, Mr. Mayor, is changes we're looking at for the heritage and so on, and how that's to operate is definitely going to have some kind of effect on some kind of money somewhere. And I'd like to see that implemented in this budget somehow. So if someone could come back and tell us how that can happen at a future meeting, that'd be good.
Probably Director Thorpe, that's part of the discussions that you've entered into already, but probably not quite concluded yet.
Spirit of efficiency. The one thing I can comment on is I had a meeting this evening, actually, or late this afternoon, with the Heritage Commission, where they walked me through their first suggested draft of a bylaw amendment. And so that's something that I look forward to bringing to council in the coming weeks. And I think based on that discussion, we can then sort of be the starting off point for the previous discussions we had about governance and operating model.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Sobey?
I do want to also mention that I appreciate that when all the departments start putting their, what I call a wish list, that you actually stood there and said, well, these are my top 4 priority, and it gives us a better focus on to what to pay attention. Because needless to say, whatever the public thinks is that money has to come from somewhere. And we have to cut somewhere, or, you know, and make what a priority. So, but I appreciate you mentioning that. Thank you.
And I have no problem with putting Parks, Rec, and Heritage priorities first, ever.
But fortunately, you earn so much money, most of them you can pay for yourself, whereas not all the other departments are able in the same position.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other councillor wish? Okay, CAO.
Mr. Mayor, in the spirit of clarity, that the last input from the public, if council wants to consider their request at subsequent meetings, you need to tell us to put it on the list. So it's not currently on the list for options.
Which particular one? The one in the RCMP one?
That's
Is that the
correct,
one you're
yes.
asking?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Sauvé?
When's the appropriate time to even revisit the 5-year plan?
Mr. Mayor, this is a budget meeting. We can revisit it now. We can revisit it. You can ask questions for which we'll bring your responses to subsequent meetings.
Okay.
No, it's just I wanted to revisit the fact in 2019 that we are taking away one position from the RCMP, which I think is really not the right way to go, but something to give us time to revisit that.
That will probably be best brought up at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be a formal motion of council in order to do that. If that's what you want to have happen, then we can put it there and it'll happen. Councillor Minions.
Thank you. I would like to consider the youth liaison officer specifically during our budget deliberations, but I'm not sure if that is a fund for another police officer or something else that Inspector Hunter could propose to give us more of a guarantee that we're going to have that officer available. I don't know what that would look like, but I'm wondering if he could bring something forward.
Well, and I think the fact that you have stated just that now, could he come back at a future time, I think that's probably sufficient, so we can get that information. Okay, Councillor McClellan.
It seems though we're beyond this subject and beating it. Have we had any conversation with the school board? How much would they like to contribute?
I bet you dollars to donuts that actually hasn't happened yet. They probably have their televisions turned off so they can't hear. But it's probably hasn't actually occurred yet. Although we do recognize that policing is a municipal responsibility and not a school district responsibility.
And the regional district for the youth liaison officer.
Ah, good. Maybe they'd like to contribute, dependent, reflective of their population. Yeah. Okay. Since doesn't appear to be anything else, Council, then motion to adjourn would be in order.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a second? All in favor? Carried. And thank you very much, everybody.